like I said, I mean, you lose your personality and you lose your ability to act. I mean, when you're down to, it's hard to follow a recipe when you read it and cook the food because it's hard to follow the logical reasoning. It's also hard to be a good husband or hard to be a good dad because you simply, if it's hard to follow a recipe, it's hard to kind of decipher a tough situation. One of your kids is mad at you, or your wife is in need. It's hard to do that.
Hey everyone, this is Heini and Zachariassen here, and welcome to Founders Weekly, where we tell startup stories you can learn from. Today's topic is one that hits close to home for many of us: burnout. It's more common than you think, and it can have serious consequences for your health, your team, and your startup. So we'll have a guest on to talk more about his experience with burnout. My co-host today is Courtney Quattrini. Courtney has worked 20 years in PR and communication, and 10 of those years with Vivino and me. She's an expert in communications and recently made a total career change and is now an associate psychotherapist. Now becoming an expert in both communication and also in founders and how founders think. Welcome, Courtney.
Thanks, Heine. It's been a while. It's nice to be back.
Yes, it's been way too long. And are you in California today?
I'm in California, the beautiful Oakland, California.
Fantastic. I'm in Spain, Barcelona. So, yes, and I think, we're probably going to Stockholm later. So we'll see where we end up. And like I said, we'll have a guest on in a second to talk about his experience with this. Courtney, what is burnout?
Burnout is maybe represented best by the bags under my eyes right now. I'm not sure. I think burnout is generally a feeling of discontentment and frustration and lack of motivation to do something that probably formerly gave you purpose because you just dug in too much, too fast, no boundaries.
Yeah, and it is no small issue. According to a recent study from Deloitte, 77% of professionals have experienced burnout at their job. Founders are especially at risk because of the pressure to succeed. So based on your experience, what are some early signs of burnout that founders should be aware of?
Yeah, so I think one of the first ones I would mention is emotional exhaustion. That feeling of, in layman's terms, I just can't. I just can't do another thing. We also start to see that burnout puts us in what's called negative sentiment override. So when you're starting to just think everything is not going well, we know the cultures when people start to stir the pot and are just generally not feeling a sense of joy. So I would say emotional exhaustion, disconnection, those types of
Sort
things.
of unhappy with your job kind of thing, right? That's what it feels like. Like I lost my mojo, motivation, and all that. That sounds like an early sign, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times that makes sense. We start a job, we go in, we're really excited, we're hopeful. And then if we don't quickly have boundaries for ourselves and with our team and our bosses, then that can go out the window actually relatively quickly.
Yeah. So what is the difference between stress and burnout? They're different, right?
Yeah, and some people might say that a healthy level of stress is okay. It pushes us to get things done, similar to how we talk about anxiety versus nerves. There's some of these things that are good for us in healthy amounts, but burnout is longevity, where you're feeling checked out for a consistent amount of time. It's not just a stressful moment, it's that it's something that you're experiencing sometimes for months or even years on end.
Yeah. So and burnout can be sneaky. The World Health Organization defines it as a syndrome resulting from unmanaged workplace stress, characterized by emotional exhaustion. It's pretty much what you said: detachment from work and reduced performance. Interesting. 42% of founders report that they work 60 hours per week, which could be a factor to this. So I'm generally very careful to talk about hours. I don't think hours are that important. I think it's the load. And sometimes I say, when it comes to stress and later burnout, it's not about what you do, it's about what you don't get done and the constant pressure of not getting things done. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And when you feel like you're spinning your wheels and you never can check your to-do list off, I know we've all experienced that at some point. So I think that's a good way to look at it. And also, there's sometimes can be this correlation or an alleged correlation between depression and burnout. And
Yeah.
it's really it's different in that sometimes burnout, when you're consistently in this perpetual state of stress, can cause depression, but they are distinct and different. And so you really want to be looking out for the warning signs.
But they can look and feel similar, right?
Yeah, and they can dance together. And you always want to consult with an expert on this if you're struggling with depression or persistent depression, because that would need a different treatment. And how you treat burnout is obviously pretty specific to your work-life balance.
Yeah. As a therapist, associate therapist, so how do founders balance this, right? Because the pressure is extreme in some cases. And is it like it's fine to work very hard for a period and then stop, or any tips on that? I know we'll dig deeper in, but still.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective, there's no one size fits all approach. So, for instance, you're someone who I think is an energizer bunny no matter what, and I saw you go go go, maybe at, you can say at the expense of feeling burned out. So, I think it's really knowing yourself and surrounding yourself with people who can help you. Like, who is
Yeah.
your team? And I know that's something you and I have spent a lot of time talking about. In really realizing what you can control and what you can't. Maybe easier said than done when you're a founder. You tell me.
Yeah, I think I've been so fortunate. I've never experienced it myself,
Mm,
but I think one thing when we talk about listening to ourselves, just to like feel the signals. I know Oscar, I guess, got to talk about that too.
yeah.
But it's also about listening to your environment. Meaning, what does your partner say? Does your partner suddenly say, "Hey, look, you're impossible right now. You snap at people all the time. What happened? You didn't do that last week." So those kinds of signals can be important too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you know that I'm a couples therapist primarily.
Yes.
So we're talking either co-founders or we're talking relational partners, and they'll
Same.
usually be the ones to pick up on it. I think the way you can look at treating burnout is twofold. One is, how can I impact the situation itself? So how can I impact work? Do I talk to my boss? If you're a founder, you usually are the boss. So what can I offload? What can I control? Like I said earlier, what can't I? Because a lot of times burnout is the result of feeling the lack of control. And then there's all of the other things that everyone will tell you, taking care of yourself, whether that's how you work
Sleeping,
out, how you eat,
exercise, usual.
mindfulness, all the things that we've all
Yeah.
heard a million times. So it's twofold.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, boss, there's always a boss. There's always someone pushing
Mhm.
you. So even for founders. So, okay.
Yeah.
We'll be diving deeper in a second when we bring our guest on after the break. Today it is Oscar Werner. He has experienced burnout firsthand. He's going to share his story, what he learned, and how he managed to recover and rebuild. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. Our guest today is Oscar Werner, who has been through burnout and is here to tell us the story. Oscar, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Oscar, let us start with the beginning here. So what happened? What did you do at the time, and how did it all go down?
So I was the CEO of a company called Cinch. It was a public company. We had 10x the company. We went from $300 million revenue to $3 billion revenue, from 300 to 4,000 people over the course of 4 years. So we did 15 M&A transactions. So needless to say, it was a relatively explosive journey. Lots of fun, but it also takes a toll on me. And to be frank, a lot of people in that type of inside the tornado kind of journey. It takes a lot of personal toll.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so it's quite interesting, right? You've been on this journey, and it's taken you years, but then suddenly this happened. What do you think led to it, and how did you realize that this was happening?
So what led to it? It's obviously a lot of like high workload over a long time, but I think the majority of it is the emotional stress that really gets onto you, right? In combination with then, based on that, losing ability to sleep or sleeping less and less and less, right? And the combination of high workload and then emotional stress is what hits me, right? And then sleeping too little over time, that's a little bit of an explosive combination. I think you can agree with that, Courtney.
And so this is like should I say, slow ramp up. You start losing your sleep, and then suddenly it just happens, right?
Yeah, I think somebody said it's very sneaky. It's something that sneaks up on you from behind. I've been in high stress situations many, many, many times in my career and I always managed to step back. I always felt I kind of have my signs. I know what it is. And I'm like, no, when I step back, I take it a little bit easy. This kind of came a little bit from behind. It sneaked up. In retrospect, I think the signs are wide open and clear. If you look at it from the outside or in retrospect, but being in this situation, it kind of sneaks up on you, and suddenly you are in a situation where you suddenly feel lower motivation to go to work, less ability to make decisions, avoiding decisions. You almost feel like your personality is changing. I'm a person that loves to be on the scene or speak to people and engage with people. And suddenly I did not want to do the all hands meetings, or I'm a person who loves the thrill of, all right, the tough situation, but then going in and saying, all right, we do X, Y, and Z. And I kind of started avoiding decisions. But that comes slowly. And so it's one of these slow changing things where you're starting to act a little bit differently and then a little bit more different, a little bit more differently. And I think that's the hard thing, because it doesn't come all at once, right? And suddenly you're in a place where you're almost lost your personality or lost your way of working that you have established for so many years.
I want to ask you a question on those symptoms and those triggers, Oscar. So I'm a therapist, and so I tend to ask about thoughts, feelings, and emotions.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, if you think about that, were there warning signs that were either, some of these thoughts that you were having, some of these emotions, and then how did you experience it in your body? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah. Warning signs, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think my wife told me a year earlier, hey, something needs to change, or it's kind of something. And I think many in my vicinity were kind of saying, well, that wasn't a surprise, if you will, right? But then it's internalizing that into yourself and having the courage and the ability to make a big change in your life. That's hard, right? Emotions, it is more like a lot more anxiety, if you will, about work, which one of my strong sides have been, I don't have anxiety about work. It's like you make the decisions and it's a business decision, that's fine. But starting to have those, or not willingness or no motivation to go to work, is like unmotivated, or wanting to be alone, not wanting to be there, being there. Right? I think this is like a lot of non-motivation, a lot of anxiety about a lot of things that you've never been anxious about before. That's kind of, and then in your
So
body,
strange.
I mean, being, obviously, when you don't sleep and when you're stressed and when you constantly, your mind is lost in thought, you have this thing that you think about it over and over again at night, or you think about it over and over again when you're home from work. That's very tiring, right? So being tired is another feeling, right? Or being in a situation where you're not able to, frustrated because not able to just clear your mind and say, let's go ahead in this direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is your normal you, right?
Which is the normal me. But then again, that not happening overnight, it happening a little bit slowly, and just like getting kind of assumed or subsumed, or kind of getting steered into this, or getting led into this in a long process is the hard thing, right? Because you don't notice it overnight, right?
Yeah. A question on this: when you said, hey, it was harder for you to make decisions, you didn't want to do the all hands, which both things that you were good at and liked. You saw that happening, but did you think about what the reason was? The reason because I lost my motivation, I don't care anymore? Was that, what did it feel like?
No, but then it felt like you non-motivated to go to work, but still you have this. If you got in there, I mean, there's a lot that goes into getting into that position, right? You still have you want to make it happen, you want to fix it, you think that you can fix it, you think if I just work a little bit harder, then it's going to solve itself. If I just I take these 2 days off and then I go back at it again. And I think it's my therapist at the time who said, or who said very, very clearly, like, this is so hard because everything you learned in life, you can do your action list. Everything that took you to the position you're in is not what's going to get you out of it, right?
No.
It's what
all the solutions are not going to work.
Excel at is like, all right, I'm going to get this done, do the action list, back off the action list, and then next, right? And now it's like, take a step back and don't have any actions. Just let your body tone down. Like, your body is like fighting wild animals on the savannah all the times, and it's getting anxious because it thinks everything is a lion. and what you need to do is to learn to reteach your body to rest, and to do that you just got to have no action. So it's like everything that brought you here is not the skill set you need to get out of here. And I think that's the really hard thing with this iteration, right?
Yeah. So a lot of Courtney, do you have something?
Yeah, I was thinking about the connection a little bit in what you're talking about to worth, and thinking about how when my clients are bringing this in, they're talking about the societal component of the, you're worthy if you're productive. And so we've got on the founder side, there's that probably tenfold. And then just as a human, when our cultures are so caught up in pushing this productivity message, a lot of the work that I'm doing with clients is around their worth outside of work, and then just like, purpose driven. So I'm wondering for you if there was a shift in the role that life or work played in your overall purpose, or how you shifted that. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, no, I think I always had a very strong purpose. Purpose is not work. Purpose is family. So I think I always was grounded in that. But I think to me, I didn't really have the ability to act accordingly.
Right.
It's I think that was always most important, but it's not how I acted, right? And I think on the good side, on the back end, or having gotten out of this and feeling really good, I think it's one of the big lessons that really changed. It's really grounded in me on an ability to act accordingly, which is one of the very large life lessons I've had, right? So, of course, when you're in that situation, a lot of your pride in yourself, maybe, and according to how good you are at work or your performance ability, your ability to perform. So that was a blow, and that was that was hard to handle, of course, but it was not the only thing. And I think I always had the other side. So it was kind of two-sided for me. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we mentioned on this already that a lot of founders would ignore the signals and just power through and do what they've always done, right? But obviously, burnout is not something you can power through. When did you realize that this is not going to continue? What was like the turning point? I think, we've talked about this before. I think there was a specific situation.
Yeah, a set of specific situations that happened, right? Somebody resigned. We acquired a lot of companies. The CEO resigned, and then in normal situations, it's like, all right, that person resigned. Right, let's get somebody else in. There's a lot of good people out. That took me really, really hard, but this one just took me hard, and that kind of was a good signal that this is going to happen. I still didn't. So that kind of made me sign up for a psychologist and work through it. I still didn't internalize all the signals again, even though you did that, and even though you were kind of could see it in the papers, you still think, well, I can actually work through this, which I assume is a very, very common thing to do, right? So even though you actually have it point blank out in paper, then you think you can work through. And then in the end, me and the board had the discussion. It was very, very clear that I couldn't execute on the company. So there was a decision made saying, all right, we need a change in strategy, or we need a change in strategy, which was really good for me. It was actually, in retrospect, super, super apparent. I mean, at the stage I was in, having 10x the company doesn't matter. At the mental stage, it was 100% the right thing to do for me, right? So that was kind of coming a little bit externally to me, which was obviously really, really good in the situation I was, right? So that maybe.
So you thought. Yeah, you thought you can go to a psychologist every Tuesday at 4, and then that was it. Go ahead, Courtney.
No, but a little bit. To be honest, a little bit like that, right? And and doing the exercises, but doing them with a clock timer, listening to them on double speed, or not really getting into it as fully as you really need to do when you need to make a fundamental life change. I think that's a very, very common thing, right? You go to a psychologist, you can do them twice or 3 times, but this is so big, you got to put your real life into it in a massive way. And I think that's if any advice I would give, it's like, cut earlier, cut harder, really get down to it. I actually had a friend who has been through a similar. He said exactly that thing to me, like, you got to cut harder, you got to cut earlier, do it now. I had all the advice, all the data, but then actually doing it is so hard because you're so kind of entrenched in your own life, you will.
Yeah, I always tell my clients that it's a meeting with me for 1 hour a week. It's great, but it's the 99.9% of the time in between, and how are you using that time? And so, yeah, you got to do the work, but when you're in a depression or a negative cycle, as you mentioned, it's really hard to do that work. And so, I think having that support to help you rest your nervous system and then retrain your brain a little bit is really important. And so I had a question for you. Now, being on the other side of this, how do you lead differently? How do you manage differently? How do you support other people who might be experiencing burnout who you work with?
So I think I always had a very human approach to management. So I think it's a much, so I think in day to day, I've always been listening a lot to people and always been very respectful of that. But it's a much more, obviously being much more sensitive to when somebody is tired, and when you see the symptoms, being clearer on giving the company or giving my support to it. So being much more thoughtful and gentle, if you will, in those situations. I think that's a big change, right? But I've never been the leader who's like, just run by the numbers, just do this. So I've kind of always had that side, but it's obviously accentuated with the change.
Yeah.
You think it'd be easier to see it in other people now that you've been through it?
Yes, I do. Definitely. I think it's easier to see it in other people, easier to notice, being like it's a pattern recognition in a way, right? So seeing the pattern and recognizes it definitely a lot easier, right? Then it's easy to say that, and then you miss it the next time. I think that's the most scary thing with these things. Again, it sneaks up on you. So will you actually notice, or will you not, or how will that happen, right? So, but yes, it should be a lot easier. Yeah.
Yeah. Just briefly on the signals at home, because we were talking work, and you did say just before that your wife had said something like a year before or something. How did you change at home? What were the signals at home?
So the tricky thing with these situations is like I said, I mean, you lose your personality and you lose your ability to act. I mean, when you're down to, it's hard to follow a recipe when you read it and cook the food because it's hard to follow the logical reasoning. It's also hard to be a good husband or hard to be a good dad, because you simply, if it's hard to follow a recipe, it's hard to kind of decipher a tough situation, and one of your kids is mad at you, or your wife is in need. It's hard to do that, right? So you actually become less good on that side,
At everything.
and much more boring, or much more. I mean, not. So I remember sitting at dinner conversations and not really having anything to say, and that's not a fun situation to be in when you have been a relatively social person, right? So you have that, but you also, and I think it's very, very common, you have like an emotional debt or emotional baggage because you worked so much for so long. So you have, even though it's been okay, even though it's been agreed, it may have been like it's a debt, or it's something that you need to. It's kind of a lot of things that are neglected. So you may have like 3 years worth of emotional debt on your bank account, which you also need to work out. So coming out of this, it was like coming out of the own stress and then coming out of a long-term debt in the relation, if you will.
Yeah.
And that's a tough hill to climb afterwards. So that was another challenge, of course.
Yeah. This is where Courtney is an expert, though. She does a lot of couple therapy. So.
Yeah, I was appreciating that you're mentioning the concept of emotional bank account, because it's something I work with a lot. And this is I think it was originally coined by Franklin Covey, and basically just saying that you really need to invest in emotional connection to build up a bank account, so that when you need to take withdrawals, when you're not feeling great in a partnership or in a work relationship, there's more to pull from. So if you're starting at zero because you're burned out, you haven't been doing that work, then you're getting in the negative. So it's a cool concept to look up if you don't know an emotional bank account. And I've got a question for both of you. Heine, I know you love when I do this.
Yeah, it's annoying. Oh, go ahead.
So we at Vivino, we used a term, and I think we had an emoji on Slack that we used that was keep pushing. And so I'm wondering from both of you, how does this message of keep pushing fit in? Was that a misstep on our part to really have that be a mantra? Is it related but different? Should we tell employees keep pushing, keep pushing? Who wants to go first?
So let me start. Yes, definitely, right? You should definitely keep pushing. But as soon as you get signals like this, you got to stop, right? So I think a lot of us are driven by this. but there's always a risk of going this far, and then you really need to stop pushing, which is hard because all we say is keep pushing. What do you say, Oscar?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I also, I mean, I had a psychologist, but also did a lot of meditation, I did a lot of like mindfulness. I had to retrain my body to relax, if you will, right? So I used MBSR from one of the most well-known kind of mindfulness techniques, right? And it's very much, right? I had to think so much, avoid doing and just being. And if you say the concept, keep on pushing, that's kind of exactly on the contrary to what you need to do. It's like 100% the wrong direction.
The opposite.
To what you need to do in this situation, which is pretty funny, even though I believe companies need to keep on pushing, but in this situation, you got to go the other way. So yeah, that's pretty clear. Right?
Which gives an idea about how hard this is for a specific type of person, right? This is how we trained our entire life, and now you got to do the opposite, like right now.
So my psychologist is saying, you cannot do anything, you should just be. And that's exactly what took you here is the opposite of what would take you out or get you out, right? You cannot use all the techniques, just read the list and action, right? You just got to tone down, not do anything.
Did it trigger you when your psychologist said to you, you need to just be? Were you like, did you feel a trigger response?
No, yeah. I mean, that is hard. It's hard even. Yeah. It's like a different. What does she mean? It's like a different language. It's like a different. So what do you really mean I should do? Well, I should just do the exercises you tell me. But no, it's not really. You should experience them in the way I mean you should experience them. And that's in a cold matters. So it's a very, very tricky concept to even understand in the beginning. And that's why it's hard to get there.
And for someone like me, I think you have to be very specific, because what happens, you come from the decision that's been made. What happens? You go home and you watch Netflix. What do you do?
No,
Heine.
Damn, not even Netflix?
No, it's a very, the good news, this is a very, I think, trainable in situation. It's a very concrete situation, if you think about it. It's like I had a cognitive behavioral therapist who was at a place who only focusing on these things. It was like a program, like 10 steps go through this, which can seem like an action list, but the action is actually to feel in the right ways or to think in the right way. So it was like a set of steps that you're going through, very, very concrete to train me in how to think or how to feel. I mean, everything from exposure theory, right? Don't call your wife and ask about everything when you should cook dinner, if you should order pizza or cook dinner. You can make the decisions yourself. The world is not coming down because either one of those decisions, right? Because I was afraid of every decision, right? So it's like, it's very concrete from a psychological perspective, right? So that's one thing. And the other one, very concrete, I think the first thing, you need to sleep. If you don't sleep well, it's going to be almost impossible to do this. So I had that side as well. So I took some medication in the beginning in order to start sleeping, and it was several rounds of getting the right one. And eventually I did. And that obviously changed a big thing. Then it was me. I got ordered to meditate every day in order to reteach my body to calm down. So 45-minute meditation every day. And I was happy because I really enjoyed that. I'd done it quite a bit in my earlier life, but I could really pick up on it and believe in it, which was really good for me. And then it's a lot of workout. I mean, not like, all right, run a marathon, but doing it from a feel-good perspective, so that's another thing. But again, don't do it as an action list. Do it because you feel good about it. And then it's like I spent a lot of time with my family and my loved ones, which was what I got energy out. It's typically, right, do what you feel good about. And so many people ask me, oh, did you travel? I'm like, no, I was just home with my kids and with my family and doing what's closest to heart to me. But all of these things are concrete things. That if done in the right mindset, not in the mindset that you just cover off the action list, done in the mindset of I'm actually toning down my body, or I'm doing it to tone down or just be, then it's very concrete, and I think it works.
And Heine, what you're talking about is a dopamine hit. So you're saying, let me go watch Netflix. That's really an avoidance technique. So that's the kind of the opposite of being in your beingness, what Oscar's talking about. And two that I would add to that awesome list, and maybe we can put some resources in the show notes if helpful, would be self-compassion. So there's a woman named Kristen Neff who has a bunch of resources on her website that help train you to have self-compassion, meditations and things like that. And then eco-psychology, being in nature. So less screen, more trees. And there's a lot of different ways in which you can do walking meditations. And so, yeah, but I agree. These are things to do. I had a therapist say to me, Courtney, why don't you approach doing this from a place of beingness? And I really needed to be like, what? And then I figured out what that meant for me. So
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. Is like, what the heck does that mean? And then understanding it
yeah.
takes some time, right? So yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to cover one more thing here, and it's about the timeline. We know that we know it took a while to get there, and then what happened after? How long a period are we talking here?
So I'm lucky I got out quickly. I'm also lucky I got good help. So I actually had a good set of resources around me to actually action. I took 15 months completely off in principle. So that's kind of that period. And that's what I continued to do, all these things. After that, I started working as a consultant for a couple of months because it was also a very large, like, what do I want to do now? What I want to do. And I had to have a soul search. Do I want to work half time? Do I want to be a consultant? Do I want to sit on boards? Do I want to, what I want to do really? And I got to emotionally the hard but true decision though. But I like operations. I like driving businesses, right? So no, I want to try to do that, which is then coupled with a lot of like, right, is that going to work or is that going to not work, and how is that, right? So you had to think through it. I talked to my psychologist, and she was like, no, I think you're actually fine. I think you got into quite a lot of insights that you can use. You have a lot of tools that you can use, both from the therapy and from the mindfulness training. So having trained a lot of these tools and how I felt, she was like, no, I think you're okay. And then I started as a consultant, and then eventually I took over as a CEO of a company, and also a company called Gillian, who builds a tech platform for loans for growth stage companies, right? Absolutely fascinating business. I think it's a lot of fun, and I think I really enjoy working. I have a lot of fun being there. So I kind of took quite a bit off, but then easing myself into it, but actually thinking that it's a lot of fun. And in that sense, in that situation, I think I have so many learnings with me, and I think that the main learning is being more grounded in the priority, having an easier time prioritizing because it's so deeply grounded on what's true to me and what do I need to do. And that takes a lot of work to be that grounded, right? And I wasn't that before. I was kind of living a little bit against the priority I was set up. But now I think I'm much easier time in the day-to-day decisions, making them in a way that is better for me, right?
First of all, it's a fantastic story that you're back as CEO. I think it's, first of all, congrats. That's fantastic. How long have you been doing that job, and how are you feeling about all that?
I'm feeling great. I've been in the job as CEO around about 9 months. Worked at a company for a little bit more than a year, right? So that's where I am.
Amazing. So thank you, Oscar, for sharing the journey with us. I mean, founders need to recognize that burnout is real, and I mean, it's just we have to be so careful, and this can be prevented and treated. So we have to look at these alarm signals and just deal with it when it comes up. We're going to go on a short break. When we come back, some final thoughts on avoiding burnout and maintaining a healthy work-life balance. We'll be right back. Welcome back. After hearing Oscar and Courtney, it's clear that avoiding burnout requires more than just sheer willpower. You need to set boundaries, take care of your mental health, and more importantly, listen to your body and mind before it's too late. So looking back, Oscar, what would you sort of tell founders now when they sort of feel on the edge? What should they do and how they hear those things? Anything you can say to founders I'm sure would be very, very helpful.
Well, it's two things. Like, one, if you feel you're close and it's hard to know, act much harder and much faster than you think. That's going to save you time out. And I think that's so important and so hard. But telling from my story, I could have acted. I could have taken a leave of absence. brought in somebody else. There is always a solution. I didn't see it. I see it afterwards very easily, but I didn't see it then, right? And the other one, I think you need to train regularly on having your mental models in order to avoid it, right? If that is running or workout that works for you, if that is going to actually setting up a relation with a psychologist to prep and to have it if it gets close, do it right away. Or if it is like working with mindfulness, which works for me, doesn't work for everybody, right? So do it now, because when it happens, when it hits, you don't have to try to train. You need the tools in beforehand. And doing those things or living according to your priorities, I mean, those things you have to do beforehand. It takes time to learn, right?
Yeah, it almost feels like when we talk about this that if you take longer to actually say pull the plug, the longer a pause you're going to need. So it took you maybe a year or more to realize it, and then you needed 14 months to get over it, right? So if you'd reacted earlier, maybe a short break could have done it. Is that just me, or what do you guys think?
I in general agree, right? But you never know. This is not the black and white. But generally, if you act quicker, then you may need 6 months off. But this is not like a linear thing. It's the human body and human brain, right? So, but generally, yes.
Yeah.
Heine doesn't always like when I answer in shades of gray, and I think
it's impossible to deal with.
I think it is a gray answer. But and just advice for founders. So I tend to think about this in two ways too, going back to the being and doing. And so it's not going to be, from my perspective, just meditation or just at workouts. It's going to be, what is that balance? And thinking about it from a nervous system perspective. When you're in fight mode, you need to release and discharge that energy, go to the gym or walk or move. When you need to ground, do, yoga, meditation. And so figure out kind of your own yin and yang and play with this concept of being and doing that we've been talking about.
Yeah, totally.
That means
totally.
you too, Heine.
Yeah, I know. I was waiting till getting down, get some Netflix. There was no Netflix involved in that at all.
There's a time and a place for it, but it's a distraction and it's a screen. But sometimes, after a long day, it's okay to just turn on something that takes your mind off of things.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on here to do something we do every week, and that is talk about what we are obsessed with right now. And I'm going to, obviously you have been briefed about this, but I'll give you a little bit of a time here, so you have a little bit of time to think, because I'm going to start with myself here. So I'm we have a house here in Barcelona, and we're actually doing this funny thing this weekend. We're going to do a little bit of a hackathon, small hackathon, where we're going to see if we can build and launch a startup like product in like 4 days. So we're starting Friday and doing the full weekend, 4 full days. And we're going to be live on YouTube every night and talk about what we built, how far we are, and so on. I'm not going to go into deep on what the product is, but it's like a small SaaS product for content creators like me, sort of built for me, sorry. But people can follow it all over follow it this weekend, which I'm super excited about when the guys come in here before the weekend and we're going to build something.
I thought you were going to say kebabs. Ryan told me you did an episode recently where you built a kebab finding app. I was like, that tracks.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes total sense. I was trying to use AI to do that. I think when he says I built something, I didn't really build anything. I really failed miserably. That was the whole video. So, but anyway,
okay, Oscar, are you ready, or do you want me to go?
You go.
Okay. So what am I currently obsessed with? Heine, you prompted me to think about this, but Yoga Nidra. So if you don't know what Yoga Nidra is, check it out. It's kind of when you're in this state of consciousness, like you're not asleep, but you're not really awake. It's really restorative. A lot of yoga studios do it. And Ryan, my partner, and I both had some burnout happening. And so we were like, we're going into Yoga Nidra restorative mode. And we've been trying to do it a couple times a week, and it really helps. So check it out if you are not familiar.
So what is it? I know yoga. What is different? What different kind of yoga is this?
Yeah. So do you know what restorative yoga means versus do you know the different times? So restorative is when you're really focused on rest. Oftentimes you're just laying down, and you're guided through a body scan, and there's multiple points in your body which you're guided to, and it's just a really beautiful practice that takes you out of that doingness. So it's a little hard to explain until you do it, but you can find guided meditations on Spotify and everywhere else if you don't want to
Very
go to a
cool.
yoga studio. So give it a whirl.
Will do. Thank you.
All right.
That's
I'm
cool.
going to answer.
Oscar, what do you say?
I'm going to answer in two ways, right? Privately, I'm obsessed with cutting things out of my life so I can actually enjoy the everyday moments. And that's a kind of a lifelong thing that I want to do, right? It's so much more fun to live when you're like, all right, I have time to enjoy this moment as it is. Right now, I just turned 50, a lot of things happening in life and a lot of friends doing the same, right? So I got to like, all right, how do I have time for that, right? And on the professional fronts, I'm super excited about the company I'm at, basically helping founders get funded by building a data platform to connect all the data, understand them in a better way, and really, if we understand them in a better way, we're able to get them much better debt funding and equity funding in many different ways because we just simply understand them better. So I believe in that, and it's just a very intriguing thing we're doing. So that's a lot of fun.
Amazing. So I'm going to skip the private side. Sounds like a good idea, though. Do less and do it better on the private side. With the business, would you connect to like an app store and look at revenue or a Stripe account, or how does that work?
Well, it's very fascinating how simple but then obvious it is. It's basically, imagine we connect to every single data source that a company has. Say, if you do your revenue via Stripe, we connect to Stripe, so we get all the transactions right. Then we connect to Google AdWords, we get all the Google spend. We connect to your accounting system, get all the data. Connect to your open bankings, we get all the data. Or you connect to your invoicing systems, we get all the data. Or you connect to your segment where you have all your clicks on your app. So basically, we get 1 million data points a day on every single company. Based on that, we know so much more. We can understand the risk in your company better. And therefore, we can give you, since you know more, we can give you debt in a way that is better or longer or more or more attractive than anyone else on the simple notion, we just know more, right? So, yeah. So it's like, I think it's something that should exist. I can't see that it won't exist in the future. And I think that's a little bit fascinating.
No, I think it's going to be huge. Yeah. Thanks, guys. We've come to the end of another episode of Founders Weekly. Thank you very much, Oscar, and thank you, Courtney.
Alrighty, thank you.
Sina.
Please make sure you follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a review and rating. It really helps. For those of you on YouTube, check out Raw Startup, a lot of videos about building a startup. This has been Founders Weekly. Now stop listening, go build something.